Okay, again, I would like to welcome everybody who is joining us today for today's webinar entitled Partnering and Paying for Alternative Transportation within and to federal to public lands. My name is Stephanie Lewis, and I will be I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I would like to briefly introduce today's presenters. We have David Kack, who is with the Western Transportation Institute, Catherine Chesson, who is with the National Park Foundation, Tom Ulrich, who is with the National Park Service, Barbara Nelson Jameson, who is also with the National Park Service, and Martha Moran, who is with the U.S. Forest Service. A full and complete bio for each of our presenters is also located in the handout section. With that, David, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
All right, thank you, Stephanie, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Hope you're warm wherever you are, enjoying the weather. Talk about the agenda real quick. So we heard a little bit from about our speakers. We want to then talk about alternative transportation systems and then the funding for those alternative transportation options. Talk about the Federal Lands Access Program and the Federal Lands Transportation Program, the two major programs coming out of the Federal Surface Transportation Bill to pay for transportation for federal lands. And we want to talk about partnerships and other sources of funding, so what else is out there. And with that, we will hear from the National Park Foundation, Sleeping Bear Dunes National Park and the Maroon Bells area of the White River National Forest, and what they've been able to do with getting creative with funding and working with partners. And then we'll have some time for some Q&A. We'll do question and answer at the end of each presenters. We'll have some time for that, and then we'll have some time at the end of the entire presentation to have some Q&A and interaction as well. So again, our presenters, I work at the Western Transportation Institute, which is the lead organization for the Paul S. Sarbanes Transit in the Parks program. Catherine will talk from the National Park Foundation and how they look at partnering and looking at national priorities. And then Tom and Barbara are going to talk about what they've been able to do at Sleeping Bear Dunes with partners and really bringing in some broad groups to talk about primarily non-motorized trail work at Sleeping Bear Dunes. And then Martha is going to talk about the work around Maroon Bells and the long history that the Forest Service has had there working to have a shuttle or transit system to the Maroon Bells area. So we'll start getting into alternative transportation systems and overview and talk about sources of funding. So alternative transportation in general is basically anything other than people driving their car or own vehicle into a federal land. So if it's by rail, by bus, by non-motorized roads, it's really that alternative mode to get people to our federal lands. Certainly in places includes ferries or watercraft, and so again that focus on people other than in their own car. So some examples, certainly shuttles or transit services to and in federal lands. Trolleys and trams. There are a few places that do have rail service to them and take advantage of that. And certainly more and more you see some emphasis on bicycle and pedestrian facilities, allowing those non-motorized modes. Then we get into ferries and other waterborne vessels, kayaks or even more smaller personal type watercraft. And also, you can get into intelligent transportation systems, electronic systems that support alternative modes. So whether they're the next bus signs that you see up here, kind of this thing, are all part of what is alternative transportation systems. One of the things when thinking about these systems is the life cycle of these various components or pieces of alternative transportation systems. We certainly have planning for what we need to do. Are we implementing alternative transportation systems to reduce congestion? It might be because of resource protection. So we think about why we're implementing ATS. Then we talk about the actual implementation of those systems. That typically includes the initial capital expense. We're buying electronic systems. Are we putting in trails? Are we buying buses? Those kind of things. Then we have the ongoing operations and maintenance. Whether it's maintaining trails, if you have to clear them of snow, you're paying for the fuel and oil and the drivers and the maintenance for shuttles. It can be just, a little bit of power and making sure that the electronic systems are working. So you have those ongoing costs. And then certainly at some point, most everything that you're going to purchase and install is at some point going to run out of useful life, and you're going to have to replace it, or you're going to want to expand it. Maybe your shuttle system is so successful that you say, geez, I need a couple of more buses. So you have to think about those expenses throughout the life cycle of whatever system that you're looking at implementing, and certainly with a good planning process, you're going to know what those are. Obviously, there is a need for alternative transportation systems in federal lands. If you look at entrance lanes in Yellowstone backing up and saying, how can we process visitors more quickly, whether it's in an area like Grand Teton where you have, people, you don't have enough parking and there's so many people wanting to be there, they start parking on the side of the road, or certainly you worry about them parking in grasslands or other areas where they shouldn't be, and damaging those resources. And then, as we see at the one picture at the Coconino National Forest, you actually get people parking in such a way that it becomes hard for people to access it, and certainly you have concerns if you have to have, emergency response to a situation to say, can I even get through the traffic? And so I think there's certainly a need for trying to see how we can get people to enjoy federal lands without everyone driving there by themselves. And it really is a balancing act. Obviously, we have the federal lands for people to experience and enjoy, but we also have that competing interest to protect those resources that the people are coming to see. And alternative transportation systems can certainly be a solution to help balance that dynamic between that visitor experience and access and resource protection. So when we talk about general sources of funding, being federal lands, we tend to initially look at the federal sources of funding, and with MAP 21 moving ahead for progress in the 21st century, the new Federal Surface Transportation Bill, those federal sources change to primarily the Federal Lands Access Program and the Federal Lands Transportation Program, although there are other federal sources including tribal transportation, other Federal Transit Administration grants, federal highway, but certainly the Access Program and the Federal Lands Transportation Program are the two main ones focused on federal lands. There's also state and local funding that you should consider. The state DOTs, their own revenue, as well as what they get passed through from the federal government, and certainly county and local governments as well. Certainly federal lands in a lot of areas are economic generators for the local communities, and certainly they want to see those federal lands succeed. And then we get into what we're going to hear from some of our presenters too, the private businesses, the friends groups, foundations, those specifically to support federal lands or others that might have a similar mission, whether it's conservation or something like that. And when we talk about sources of funding, a lot of times those friends groups provide labor or do things that offset expenses. So they might not be saying, hey, I'm going to write you a check, but they say, I'm going to do some work where that expense of maintaining a trail or doing something specifically around alternative transportation systems, that expense goes away so you don't have to raise as much money. Again, when we talk about what was the primary source of funding in the old safety lieu versus what we have now under MAP 21, the transportation in parks and public lands programs, the Paul S. Sarbanes program, was administered by the Federal Transit Administration, so it had a very strong emphasis on alternative modes. It was a nationally competitive process in that they had a call for projects, and you were competing with everybody else in the country. And one of the things with that program, it said that the funding was not supposed to be used for operations. So that was something for people operating shuttles or transit services that got to be kind of a sticky situation, as it wasn't supposed to be used for that ongoing operational cost. Under MAP 21 and the Federal Lands Access Program, those are administered by the Federal Highway Administration and their Federal Land Regional Offices. As we'll see in some detail, each state has been allocated funds primarily on the amount of federal lands in that state. And the two major programs, again, are the Federal Lands Access Program and the Federal Lands Transportation Program. And we'll get into a little more detail with those. So the transportation program is to improve multimodal access within federal lands. And the boundary line between the two is kind of, the Federal Lands Transportation Program is within the boundaries of the federal land, and the access program is pretty much everything outside, though there's a little bit of a buffer there, where if it's just adjacent to that boundary, those funds can kind of get used on either side. The transportation program funds are going to be distributed to the 5 major federal land management agencies, and they will distribute it to their particular units from there. And really, this is a complement to the Federal Lands Access Program, in that the access program gets the people to the boundary of that federal land, and then the transportation program says, okay, then we're going to carry them into the land and around within that federal land. So we had $300 million for each of fiscal year 2013 and 14 appropriated for the program. And for those of you who might not know the federal bills quite as well, typically the Federal Surface Transportation Bill is a 6-year bill, but with MAP 21 we only got a 2-year bill. So that was what was appropriated for the 2 fiscal years. We see the breakdown of the funding, the National Park Service getting a bulk of it for each year, but Fish Wildlife getting, and then BLM, Forest Service, and Army Corps Engineers. And this is 100% federal funding, so the federal lands do not need to find any match for programs that are funded through this. When we look at the access program, then it's established to improve facilities that provide access to, are adjacent to, or located within federal lands. And again, that's where that little bit of a buffer is, that, you know, Federal Lands Access Program, if you say I'm going to just go right into the entrance of this federal land and then there's a parking lot, I can use flap funding for that and don't have to say, well, once I cross that border, this money can't be used for it. But certainly you're not going to look probably at using access program funds once you say I'm getting in 8, 10, 20 miles into a federal land. So again, it looks at alternative modes. You can use it for roadways, but it looks at transit systems and other transportation facilities. And what they really are looking at are high-use recreation sites, and they talk about economic generators. And there was some discussion of whether that means for the federal land agency as it a big economic generator? Is it an economic generator for a gateway community? So there's still some discussion, but again, typically high use, this money is going to go where you have a lot of visitors in those federal lands. There was $250 million each year in fiscal year 13 and 14 allocated for this program. And we'll get into a little more detail, but you'll see the preference was given to western states that have a lot of federal lands within them. And there was a formula set aside in map 21 looking at the number of federal road miles, visitation to the federal lands, and some others. This does require match, and depending on the state you're in, it can be anywhere from about, I think it's 13.42 is the exact number, to 20%. So if you want a project funded with the Access program, you are going to have to find some additional money. So looking real quick at the allocations that we see, California getting the largest share, Montana did pretty well at the next most. And then we see as you move kind of from the western states, certainly to the East Coast, that money goes down. So, depending on the project, some of this money can get eaten up pretty quickly. And we see that Rhode Island gets a little less than $14,000 for each year. So, certainly some states are getting a lot of it, and that tends to be where the federal lands and the visitation are in the different federal land units. When we talk about eligible activities with this Access program funding, it talks about planning, research, engineering, maintenance, rehabilitation, construction, reconstruction. So a pretty wide range of activities. You can do planning. It doesn't all have to be focused on implementation. You don't have to build something or start something new. Certainly that's where you're going to see some of the benefits of those alternative transportation systems, but those only should be, implemented when you have good planning to show that that project is hopefully going to be successful. A little more detail about eligible activities. We talk about parking areas, scenic easements, historic sites, a lot of emphasis on, those non-motorized modes, putting in provisions, trails, separated pathways, those kinds of things for bicyclists and pedestrians. It talks a little bit about what we call road ecology or wildlife transportation interaction. If you have, if you're driving to a federal land and you say, geez, we're having to hit a lot of animals on this roadway, you can look at things like underpasses or overpasses to reduce that wildlife mortality. It does, the one big thing with the Access program is it specifically says the operation and maintenance of transit facilities. So where under Safety Lou, it basically the law said you shouldn't be providing funding for the ongoing operations and maintenance of transit or shuttle systems. The Access program makes it very clear that that is an eligible expense. So who can apply, and this is for the Access program. Again, they talk about a roadway, bridge, trail, or transit system that is located on, adjacent to, or provides access to federal lands. Now, this next piece that I bolded is kind of important because they say the title or the maintenance responsibility is vested in a state, county, town, township, tribal, municipal, or local government. So doing some work, there's a lot of times with roads in and to federal lands to say, well, who actually owns the road? And sometimes there's a lot of legal research that goes on to say, whose road is this? Who is responsible for maintaining it? Who owns it? The one thing about nonprofits is in a lot of rural areas, you see nonprofits are running a transit system. And so right now the discussion has been that they are not eligible, even if they would provide access to a federal land, because it's the way it's written. The nonprofit has the title to the buses and the maintenance responsibility for them, and therefore they are not eligible. The process to apply for the Access Program funding, there's a call for projects on a state-by-state basis. Interested entities submit applications to the Federal Land Highway Division office, and we'll show you where those 3 regional offices are. There is in the central and western states what they call a project selection team. And that group gets the applications and reviews them and kind of puts them in an order. That group can conduct a field review of projects. So for people who have applied already, you might get a call from someone saying, hey, we're going to come out and look at where you're proposing this trail, or we want to look at where you might route this transit system. And the project selection team includes the 3 people who sit on the program decision committee and representatives from the different federal land agencies in the state. And the program decision committee are the 3 people within each state who decide what will ultimately get funded. That includes a representative from the Federal Lands Highway Divisional Regional Office that would cover that particular state, someone from the State Department of Transportation, and then they talk about an appropriate political subdivision of the state. Sometimes that's someone from an association of counties. It could theoretically be someone from a state legislature, but they basically decide who that 3rd person is who's going to make those decisions. Again, the program decision committee will get the program selection team's input. They will look at a program of projects. Obviously, they want to look at, and in the application it talks about, has this project already been identified in transportation plans as something that wants to happen? Do they see the federal land has had an interest in this access? And so certainly they're looking for something that just doesn't come in out of the blue. Project agreements are then negotiated and signed. Again, they're going to look at, do you have that federal do you have the match for the federal money? Again, there's 13 to 20% of local funds that need to be put together, and certainly the federal agencies want to see that that's there before they embark on a project, and then that moves ahead. So before this webinar, how many of you were aware of the Federal Lands Access Program?
Okay, David, we'll give them a couple more seconds to respond. I'm going to close the polls and show the results. Go ahead, David.
Okay, well, fortunately, a lot of people were. There was some discussion about how well this was information about this was distributed to folks, so I'm glad to see that a lot of people knew that it was out there. Okay, and then with the second one, are you aware whether or not there has been a call for Federal Lands Access Program projects in your state? Again, there's been some discussion how well those that information has gotten out there.
Okay, it looks like a few people are still responding. Okay, I'm going to close the polls and show the results.
Okay, so more of a mix this time, and I can just follow up quickly by saying the western states, those calls are all done in the Central Federal Lands Highway Division. New Mexico and Wyoming, that call for projects is still open until January 10th of 2014. And then there's 7 states in the Eastern Federal Lands Division that still have calls for projects still open. And so when we look at those contexts, clicking too many times here, what those different regions are, you see here the different regions. So basically the Eastern Federal Lands is pretty much everything east of the Mississippi. Central Federal Lands, as I said, New Mexico and Wyoming still have those call for projects are still open. So you see the internet address website for the 3 different federal land agency offices, and if you go to those websites, they basically have at the top it talks about different programs, and you can look at the FLAP, the access program information under that. And for those states that have a call open, they'll talk about the process and here's the application, and show you how to get more information, and then move ahead with that. So with that, we'll open up to a couple of short Q&A before we move ahead into the next presentation.
Okay, it looks like we have 2 questions. The first question is, does MAP 21 allow operations to be paid out?
Yes, again, with MAP 21, they made it very clear that for transit services that the ongoing operations maintenance, those expenses are eligible expenses under the access program.
Okay, we have another question that says, can you let us know which of the 7 states in the Eastern Division are still open?
Yes, they are Alabama, Connecticut, Louisiana, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, and Tennessee. And the quickest one to close, Alabama, closes January 7th. I should say, I guess actually Louisiana closes Christmas Eve Day, the 24th, and then the other ones are in February or March. So Louisiana is first, and then Alabama.
Okay, it says, we have a few questions. So it says, can you talk a bit about the federal funding streams for urban national parks? Do they rely more on state or local funds?
I don't know enough. It's a real mix. With, a lot of the large urban parks, the transportation systems that get people right to the door are typically owned by the state or the local entity, because you don't have these large areas of land mass that are the park. It tends to be in the urban areas. The park is really that land that is the site, and all the transportation to get people there is owned by the state or those other entities. So it really varies, but I know through some other work, having discussions with some parks, and if it was Valley Forge, they actually spent a year trying to figure out the ownership of a road. Was it the Park Service? Was it the state? Was it somebody else? So I just say, be wary of urban legends, and certainly do due diligence to say who owns or maintains a roadway or other transportation facility.
Okay.
Well, great. With that, and there will be, again, time at the end of the presentation for people to ask questions again of myself or the other presenters. So with that, we'll talk to Catherine Chesson, who gets to sit at home today from the Washington, D.C. area, who is going to talk about the National Park Foundation and their Transportation Scholars and Active Trails program.
Great. Thanks, David. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I am going to talk about two specific funding opportunities that we offer at the National Park Foundation, the Transportation Scholars Program and the Active Trails Program. You can go to the next slide. So the National Park Foundation is the official charitable partner of the National Park Service. We were chartered by Congress in 1967. And our primary role is to raise philanthropic dollars for the Park Service, which then I get to give back out to the parks. Next slide. So we work with all of the NPS units as well as affiliated programs and offices. And this is just kind of a blanket slide of the Park Service. Next slide. We have three focus areas where we try and make an impact at the National Park Foundation. They are Protect, Connect, and Inspire. And these are some of the grant programs we offer under each of those three areas. And you can find out more about our grant programs at our website, nationalparks.org. Next slide. So the first and the program that I'm primarily focused on today is the Transportation Scholars Program. This is the longest running program we operate at NPF, and really trying to pair emerging professionals with parks who need some assistance with their transportation planning to address a number of issues. We've had 57 scholars in the 10, 11, 12 years that we've been running the program. We've awarded through the scholars nearly $2.5 million to 47 national parks, and in turn, scholars have secured over $14 million for the NPS units where they've been based, which is pretty remarkable. In 2012, the Sarbanes Transit and Parks program replicated this program, and so now we offer a parallel program where scholars can serve at the other federal land agencies, Fish and Wildlife, BLM, etc. Next slide. So what is the Transportation Scholars Program? It pairs recent graduates, emerging professionals with national parks for either a 6 or 12-month assignment, depending on what the park applies for. The scholars are 1 to 3 years out of graduate school and typically come out with a master's in either urban planning or civil engineering. They work on transportation-related projects, listed some below, traffic congestion, looking at a pilot shuttle system, which could be everything from the design of the wrap on the bus to the O&M cost for the bus to what the actual possible routes might be depending on the vehicle type, etc. Projects related to visitor experience and safety and wildlife management. Common tasks that scholars are asked to work on include coordinating stakeholders and partner organizations, spanning a specific issue across the country or regionally, gathering and analyzing data. Like I said, with the $14 million scholars have been secured, they do participate in a lot of grant writing for the park, looking at what kind of revenue streams are out there, such as SLAP, and then providing recommendations for the park to move forward after their assignment is over. Next slide. So I'll go into 3 project examples just to kind of give you a flavor of scholars, and these are all current scholars. I think some of them may be even on the phone call. But so we have one scholar at Bandelier this year, and you can read through some of what they're working on. And this came directly out of the parks application, so you can see kind of how parks position their projects, assisting in wayfinding, establishing partnerships, coordinating with the county. As David mentioned, just trying to figure out who is in charge of what right-of-ways or roads that may be running through or in the gateway communities around the park. And then a theme that you'll also see is this the bike loop that's mentioned in the second bullet. A lot of emphasis recently we're starting to see in the applications on bike and ped safety or improvements. So that's a trend that we're seeing. The second example, next slide, is at the National Mall, and the scholar there is working, picking up on the efforts of a 2011 scholar and looking again at pedestrian and bicycle safety, trying to come up with, trying to identify some specific projects the park can make headway on. The mall is a large commuter pathway for DC residents, so trying to balance commuting and recreation and the different types of users. And then, let's see, supporting the DC area and reducing traffic congestion, and again, improving connections for different types of both getting to the park and then experiencing the park. And that's another thing that we're seeing a lot of, is not only looking at how do visitors access the park, but then once they're there, how do they experience the park. Next slide. So the third project, we actually have a second-year scholar at Yellowstone who's working on the Gardner Gateway project. She is the only full-time paid staff person that's working on this project, and really one of her biggest values is that she's not a Park Service staff person, so she can kind of work, you know, with the relationship of the park and the Gateway community as sort of a neutral entity. And I think that that's one of the biggest benefits of the Scholar program, is that they're not employees of the Park Service or Fish and Wildlife, but they are working for them and for their interests, but can represent sort of multiple viewpoints. But her project specifically, she's looking, or the project is looking to improve the north entrance station around the historic Roosevelt Arch, improving the walking area around there for folks that want to take pictures in front of the arch, improving some basic drainage and connectivity of the downtown Gardner area, which is a fairly small, quaint area. And then, again, as I said earlier, working with 15 project partners, so kind of coordinating the different entities that are invested in the project. And then the project was successfully awarded over $10 million from the SLAP program, which I think speaks a lot about the ability of the scholars and what they can accomplish. So the application process, if you move to the next slide. So we're currently actually accepting RFPs from parks for the next year of the Scholar program. We usually award between 4 and 5 projects for each year. Applications are to be accepted from all of the 401 units, as well as affiliate areas or affiliated units that are officially administered by NPS. And if you represent an agency or a unit and you're not quite sure, you can certainly email me and we can figure that out. We have a review committee that selects both the park projects and then matches the Scholar applicants with the parks. And in the RFP, we have a list of requirements and outcomes that we ask each applicant to address in their application. The park projects are selected before we start recruiting scholars so that we can use those project descriptions and the scopes of work to recruit scholar candidates. And then, as I said, scholars a few months later are selected and matched by the advisory board. Next slide. So the timeline, the deadline for proposals is actually December 20th this year, so you still have some time if you are interested. And then after the new year, we announce the selections of those parks, put the RFP out to the scholars through our partner organization, the Eno Center, and then from there select the scholars so that they are ready to go. And then in early June, we hold a week-long training at the Denver Service Center in Lakewood, Colorado, to orient the scholars to the mission of the Park Service, the history, kind of what's going on in alternative transportation in the Park Service, and as well as the other federal land agencies. We do that in partnership now. And then about mid-June, the scholars report to their parks for their respective 6 or 12-month assignments. Next slide. So some of the logistics, if you are interested in applying, parks are required to provide housing for the scholar, provide office space, kind of the basics of what they would need to do their job. And then parks are also responsible for providing a designated staff person who oversees the scholar during their time at the park and acts as a liaison to myself at the foundation. NPF pays the scholars directly, so they're not actually employees of the park. I think they're treated more like volunteers in the parks, and they receive $50,000 for a 12-month project or $25,000 for a 6-month project. I'll also say that if parks think that they have a project that could be a 6-month project or could be a 12-month project, you're welcome to submit timelines for 2, and then the review committee can kind of look through the proposals and see how that might play out. Next slide. Funding sources. So this is what we've seen at the foundation. We had a 10-year commitment from the Ford Motor Company that ended in 2009. So that was really the sole source of funding for a long time. And since then, we've turned to other agencies and partners. The Federal Transit Administration provided some funds in 2010. The Motorola Solutions Foundation, which is sort of the CSR arm of Motorola, has provided funding. They just renewed for this year, so for 4 years. And the Federal Highway Administration also provides matching funds. We also, this year for the first time, received funding from CSX. And sort of getting into some of the motivations for those that are interested in what we're seeing at a national level that corporations specifically are interested in and why they're interested in the Scholars Program. For Ford, it was promoting alternative transportation, reducing congestion in parks. For Motorola, they're very interested in public safety, which is similar to CSX, and they are also very interested in workforce recruitment, so having scholars potentially come work for them after their terms in the park. Next slide. So that is sort of the summary of the Transportation Scholars Program. Our RFP, if you are interested in applying, is on our website at nationalparks.org, and you can access it there. And if anyone has questions about that specifically, perhaps after the call, after you've read through the RFP, you're more than welcome to email me or call me. The Active Trails Program is a little bit different and doesn't focus necessarily on vehicle transportation, but more, I guess, pedestrian experiences in the park, really looking at trails and waterways. There's smaller grants to parks, usually about $20,000 to promote healthy lifestyles and get the community out and active in parks, either on land or water trails. There's usually some form of volunteerism as part of their projects. Folks, Boy Scouts restoring a trail, or a local veterans group who comes out and, you know, kind of takes care of the trail or whatever it may be. Some examples of projects are below. Delaware Water Gap. They are working with their community to offer additional public programming, increasing the publicity, so just, you know, making folks more aware of how they can use the park and ways to use the park, and then creating available transportation to and from the trail venues. And then at Gulf Islands, it was more of a water trail project, and they were looking at new programs, ranger-led kayaking and canoeing expeditions, improving the signage, wayfinding exhibits that folks could access from the water. And then they held a community kickoff event to kind of drum up some attention and support for their project. The RFP for this program won't be released until after the new year, probably late January, and then grant activities usually take place from April to December. Before I go to questions, we have 2 additional resources. I'm not sure if they're were able to be attached to the this presentation or not, but we probably about a year ago held a proposal writing webinar for folks who maybe have not written an application for the foundation before, and we kind of walk you through the steps and then provide some examples of strong and weak applications, and in those examples sort of point out what makes them strong or what makes them weak. So I'm not sure if they're attached to this webinar, but if they're not, you can email me. I have my email address listed there, and I'm happy to send those to you.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. At this time, we'll stop and take any questions for Catherine. It looks like we have one that popped in. This one's kind of lengthy, but I'll read it for you. It says, I assume the Transportation Scholars Program is only to NPS, FNWL, and other government agencies. However, are you open to partnering with non-government stakeholders to provide capacity on federal transportation goals for federal public lands? If so, can we get in touch with your team?
Sure, that's a great question. So due to our congressional charter, we are limited to providing funds to national park units specifically, and then our kind of sister parallel program works with the other federal land agencies. However, we do always encourage partnerships, and if there's a park that wants to partner with a non-federal entity, they can always submit a joint application and then even designate that the partner organization be their fiscal fiduciary partner, so the funds can go directly to the partner organization. But unfortunately, due to the nature of our congressional charter, at least one national park has to help submit the application.
Okay, thank you. Is the non-park service transportation scholar program funded for the future?
I believe, and I have to confirm, that they have funding for a fish and wildlife scholar next year, and we are currently working on a game plan to hopefully secure some additional funding, but I don't believe there's been an active call to the other units, but I can follow up with whoever asked that question.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. I did check a copy of the 2 documents Catherine was speaking about are located in the handout section of Live Meeting, which is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Tom and Barbara, who are going to discuss Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. Tom or Barbara?
Well, this is Barbara, and Tom was going to do the first part of the presentation. Are you there, Tom? Nope, I guess not. Alrighty, well, I can go ahead. Barbara Nelson Jameson, and I'm with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, and I'm stationed here at Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. And Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore is located on the Leelanau Peninsula in Michigan, and it was established in the 1960s. And let me go on a little further. The National Lakeshore receives about 200. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really not very good about this part of the program. I apologize. But what I'll do is talk about the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail, which I do know about. The Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail is a 27-mile long multi-use trail that will run through the Leelanau County, through half of the National Lakeshore. And the trail will provide safe, non-motorized transportation for visitors and it connects the major visitor attractions within the National Lakeshore, and then with the two gateway communities.
Barbara,
Hello, Barbara.
That should be Tom.
Hello, we just resolved a technical glitch.
Oh, good, because
Yeah.
I didn't do a very good job of explaining the National Lakeshore, so take it away.
Oh, you were doing quite well. I was listening. I just couldn't speak. So, but indeed, I saw that Barbara has showed the vicinity map, and we are on the pinky of the Mitt here in Michigan. And we are covering a case study, the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail, which is a non-motorized trail that provides a meaningful means of alternative transportation here within the lakeshore and into our gateway communities. And as Barbara, I'll just pick up from where she left off.
Thank you.
The planning is completed. We have built 4 miles of the trail, but eventually it will be a 27-mile trail that will connect most of the visitor attractions with our two gateway communities, nearby villages of Empire and Glen Arbor. Provides both recreation and transportation alternatives that heretofore had not existed in the lakeshore or within those communities. The state highways that this non-motorized trail roughly parallels are part of the State Scenic Byway System. It's the Leelanau Scenic Heritage Route. They were added back in 2001, and the most significant piece of this is that it provided a platform from which that group who manages the State Scenic Heritage Route could apply for some of the grants that David referred to, and subsequently obtain those for a variety of things that enhance the qualities that make it eligible for the Scenic Byway System, including establishing this non-motorized trail system. That group is made up of multiple jurisdictional interests, as you can see from the slide: townships, villages, the county, the State Department of Transportation, the National Park Service, local Indian tribe, a number of private organizations, Rotary, cycling clubs, etc., and local citizens. The committee's activities are coordinated by a group established here, the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments, which does a lot of coordination among differing municipalities for projects just such as this, that cross jurisdictional lines. The timing for the national park was perfect because the Scenic Heritage Route group proposed the idea of this non-motorized trail to us at a time when we were just beginning our general management planning process. So it worked well for us to evaluate it to see whether or not it fit the National Park Service mission here at Sleeping Bear through our 3-year planning process. And the general route and the concept were analyzed for matching our mission and for the environmental impact. And it was widely supported. And indeed, the resulting plan included zoning for the trail, not just through Leelanau County, but in case in the future, our southern county, Benzie County, elected to establish the highway there as part of the State Scenic Heritage Route system. The trail could then be continued down through the southern part of the lakeshore, as you can see on the map here. And the reason we thought it met our mission is that this is the way many people see Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. And of course, we prefer that they slow down a little bit and get a chance to see things at a more leisurely pace, get out and explore and access locations beyond their vehicle. And indeed, this is a recreational opportunity that had not existed in the park. Previously, we had no miles of bicycle trail or any trail for non-motorized wheeled transportation. Bicycling is very popular in the area, but while it's easily done on some of the more rural roads like this one, the county road through the lakeshore, many of the primary routes that would have provided a good transportation route connecting the communities to park attractions were much busier. And so we wanted to provide a safe place for this demographic to travel, because so many of our visitors are family, and come to the campgrounds, and the trail goes right through the back loop of one of our primary campgrounds. And yet, those folks who travel here with their bicycles cannot use those bicycles if they have younger family members to get around the park or to access the local communities, and they end up riding endless loops around Loop 2 of the D.H. Day campground. So the other reason we wanted it established is that it does provide a meaningful way to get around to the many park attractions. And this is just a partial graphic depiction of some of the primary park attractions that the trail will access directly, or at least provide access to a short spur route to get to these various places that people wish to go. One ahead. So the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail met many of the national initiatives going on in the National Park Service at present and within Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. Certainly trying to reduce the carbon footprint, both of our administrative staff and of our visitors, trying to get people healthful outdoor recreation opportunities, trying to provide an entree to younger visitors, a place, and we've already seen this happen where kids come out and perhaps they're a little tentative about getting out in the woods, but the more familiar bicycle path gives them the confidence they then have to expand that out to hiking trails or paddling. Community-based stewardship and recreation, and then of course the America's Great Outdoors and connections to that outdoor. So of course, following the evaluation in the more general terms of the concept and route, we did complete an environmental assessment that in more detail analyzed the specific route and specifications for the trail, width, surface, etc. And that also was sent out for public review, and a trail route was selected that largely paralleled those state highway road corridors, but in some places was able to depart from them and use other existing corridors or breaks in the forest canopy where we had existing trails, an old historic narrow gauge railroad bed, etc., and a finding of no significant impact was signed for that route back in 2009. We partnered with the Michigan Department of Transportation formally with a partner construction agreement. They have a great deal of experience in planning and constructing similar non-motorized pathways throughout the state, and so they have proven a very capable partner thus far. The trail is being phased as funding is secured. We originally anticipated a $10 million project in about 10 years. We did a feasibility study with our partner looking at fundraising. However, we have been highly successful at obtaining some grants, and Barbara will detail those a little later in the presentation. And already, even though the price tag has increased slightly since the planning first began, we do already have $10 million in hand, which is enough to fund a great deal of the trail. And you can see on this slide the gateway communities of Empire and Glen Arbor connected by the red line. That will be done by this June, and that connects our two gateway communities through many of the park's primary attractions. So that first segment opened in June of 2012. We've looked at use in August, and we're estimating a little over 400 people a day using that 4-mile section. And then the next segment will be completed this spring and finish that red phase that I showed on the previous slide. The fundraising, again, the total cost has crept up over $10 million. We originally projected 50% from public grants and 50% from private philanthropy, but the grants, again, as Barbara will detail, have moved much more quickly. So Barbara, do you want to take over at this point?
Give Barbara a second to unmute.
There we go. Thank you, Tom. As you can see here, the public grants, the public funding came from a number of federal transportation sources. Two came from the Federal Highway Administration Public Land Highway Discretionary Fund. 3 of the grants came from Federal Transit, Fall-Sarbanes Transit and Parks. 3 of the grants came from Federal Highway National Scenic Byways. And then also from the Michigan Department of Transportation Safety Lou Transportation Enhancement Program. And the matching funds for those grants which require matches, like National Scenic Byways and the MDOT Enhancement Grant, came from either MDOT, the National Park Service, or our partner, TART Trails. Besides the funding we received from TRIPTAC, TRIPTAC also provided the project technical assistance, and through the David Evans and Associates, which is an A&E firm out of Portland, Oregon. And the assistance they provided is they designed for us a donor recognition plaza that will be located at the primary trailhead for the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail, located at the Dune Climb, really highly visible site within the park. And the facility is designed to recognize all the private donors who have contributed at least $1,000 or more to the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail, and in cash and or services. I should say that facility is going to start to be constructed this spring and summer. So that's a good segue to talk about the private fundraising effort for the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail. You know, fortunately, we have a well-established nonprofit organization, TART Trails, which is Traverse Area Recreation and Transportation Trails, Inc., which have successfully funded and assisted on 6 other multi-use trail projects in the region. So the National Park Service, we entered into a formal fundraising agreement with TART Trails to coordinate and implement the capital campaign, Pathways to Sleeping Bear. And the capital campaign was chaired by our former Governor Milliken, who's also a local resident and a proponent of trails. And to date, like it says, we've actually secured over $1.6 million, and this money provides match for those grants where we need matches. It covers our maintenance costs for the trail. It's been covering signage and obviously other trail facilities that are as needed. And it will also go towards the construction of the donor recognition facility that I just talked about. So the donors to the Pathways to Sleeping Bear capital campaign, they include area businesses, such as our local grocery stores and area outfitters. We've been very successful with state and local foundations. Clubs like the Traverse City Track Club and the Cherry Capital Cycling Club have been donors in supporting the project, as well of course as individuals. In addition to the dollars that we're receiving, the cash donations, we receive significant donated services which are helping the capital campaign. For instance, you're looking at a print or a picture that was done by Glenn Wolfe, a local artist, and this print is used as a donor appreciation gift. We give that as a limited edition print to those donors who have given $5,000 or more to the project. We've also received services in writing and photography to help with capital campaign publications like the one you just saw previously. Cycle tours have been provided, again, by local outfitters to get those foundation staff out on the trail to help build support for funding getting travel writers on the trail to get the word out, build awareness about the trail. And then we have had events, too, that have been conducted by a number of different organizations. One, for instance, is called the Dune Dash, which is a 4-mile run, hike on the section of the trail, and all the proceeds then go to the capital campaign. The Friends of Sleeping Bear, they're the Friends group for Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, and they have been providing really important operation and maintenance services to support the trail. For instance, they've been developing and now coordinating and installing the signage, which is quite a project for the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail. They've been conducting user counts for the trail to get our visitor statistics, user statistics on the trail. They have an ambassador program, which was actually funded by the National Park Foundation's Active Trails program, where ambassadors in orange vests, they roam the trail, provide visitor assistance, provide some interpretive services. And then the Friends of Sleeping Bear also are collecting funds on the trail in donation canisters that are located along the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail. The Friends have an arrangement with the park, an agreement with the park for preventative and routine maintenance. The maintenance is supported by $1 million maintenance investment account, and this account is populated during fundraising for each phase of the trail. So we have the funds for maintenance in hand when we open up each new trail section or segment to the public. So this truly is a partnership effort, the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail. And just to quickly summarize the roles and responsibilities of our partners, the Leelanau Scenic Heritage Route has been representing the local municipalities and governments along the trail. The Northwest Michigan Council of Governments, they've been coordinating the Heritage Route program, which is basically a scenic byway program, and have provided a lot of grant expertise and planning expertise. Friends of Sleeping Bear, again, really important in operation and maintenance assistance, and also fundraising. Our trails, they're running our capital campaign, and they also have a lot of trail expertise, whether it relates to conflicts, trail use conflicts, or safety, but they've really been helpful to our planning and our managing of the trail. Michigan Department of Transportation has been the primary contractor and oversees the construction of the trail, and also the design and engineering. Our program, Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance, we've been involved in the grant writing, the early planning, grant writing, and then assistance to the communities that are the gateway communities to the park. And then obviously Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore is the primary landowner and land manager for the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail. So, some 3,000 users, trail users, per week are estimated in the summer of 2012, and that came from those survey results from the Friends of Sleeping Bear, 3,000 per week. They also found in their survey results that there's just an immense satisfaction with the trail experience. It's a beautiful trail. It doesn't follow a railroad right away. It meanders and goes through some magnificent scenery. And there's also an overwhelming desire to keep the project going and make it longer. That was the thing that we heard the most, was make the trail longer. So Tom, would you like to add anything before we open it up to questions?
First of all, can you hear me? Make sure of that.
Yes, we can.
We can hear you now.
Okay. I think just one thing to emphasize is certainly the Park Service is looking very closely at investing in any capital improvement unless you have a sound plan to pay for the total cost of facility ownership throughout its lifespan. And so including 10% of the overall project cost to be set aside in an investment account that will pay for component renewal, recurring maintenance. That was key to getting this project approved, and I think key to the success of the project, because we have built in, and we did a fairly detailed analysis of what those anticipated costs are, built in a way to pay for the trail maintenance until year 25 of the trail, and we're front-loading it, as Barbara indicated. With that, I guess we could open up to questions.
Okay.
Okay. If you would like to ask a question via the Q&A manager, simply use that, which is located in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Or if you're on the telephone and would like to ask a question directly to our presenters, simply press *8 on your telephone keypad. It looks like we have just a, we have a question via the telephone. This is from Biloxi, Mississippi. I'm going to open that telephone. And then it should transfer over in any second. Okay, Biloxi?
Yes, this is Jim Foster, Heritage Trails Partnership. I'm interested from presenter how that front load maintenance, recurring improvements, where is that invested, or how is that managed, if you would? Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I certainly can. That is being managed by our fundraising partner, the partner who is also responsible for seeking the private philanthropic donations, because largely the grants will not pay for that long-term investment. They're more focused on construction and, if you're lucky, some design. And so it's being held by our fundraising partner. And then decision-making about it is managed by the steering committee for the trail, so the National Park Service, the Friends Group, that fundraising partner, Michigan Department of Transportation. And the contracting, if and when indeed contracting, as it will take place, will be implemented by our Friends Group, so that, as they are for a number of the other components. So they manage the contracts with that funding being held by our fundraising partner. Is that clear?
Thank you so much. I suspected that might be true. I'm grateful for the explanation, and I congratulate you on having a former governor in the picture.
Yeah, we were very pleased when Bill and Helen Milliken agreed to chair the endorsement council.
So much.
Okay. I think with that, we will hand the presentation over to Martha.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, Martha, we can hear you.
Great. I have the fun honor to, I'll start back on talk about Maroon Bells. It's a scenic area. It's a portal to wilderness. And I'm going to talk about the history of this area and then integrate some new modes of what I talk about of how this has all worked for 30 plus years. So talking about alternative transportation. So the bottom line is I just want to share is I think, and we've heard it over in there, is the 6 Ps, and the key one I'm going to start with is planning, and that's a key element, but the other ones are partnerships, as we just heard, to make this program successful. And I lump persistence and patience to deal with the program and make it change, as well as there's public challenges and public support from moving this whole project going for 30 years. And the pay part of it all, which we just talked about, again, how to make this work. And we started with some creative funding. And lastly, how do you keep this program going with the focus of sustainability? So just for you folks that I'm talking to, where is Maroon Bells? Maroon Bells is on the west slope. As you can see, it's just 10 miles outside of Aspen. And our ranger district goes from just thought I'd share with you. It goes this whole area from Glenwood Springs all the way up to Independence Pass, a very scenic area. But Maroon Bells is one of the showcases of the Forest Service and, of course, in the White River National Forest. So what I wanted to share with you is that we have, and I say raft up there, it's Roaring Fork Transit Authority. You're going to hear me talk about that. What is it? And basically it starts in Aspen if you want, but our main portal starts at Aspen Highland Ski Area in the summer, and the bus picks you up and does an interpretive tour all the way to Maroon Bells. That's about 8 miles, and it's 2 miles from Aspen down there. So, but the bottom line, it's 10 miles from Aspen, and it costs $6. And you get an interpretive talk, like a national park talk, by our partners of the raft, the bus driving. Of that money, the Forest Service only gets about 50 cents of that $6, because the rest is for operations to maintain the bus system. So what is it? Maroon Bells is a scenic area. It's a portal to all these beautiful wilderness trails. We have all sorts of hiking, photography, biking, camping, picnicking. In the winter, right now, we've got people cross-country skiing. They relax, they fish. There's family time. There's all sorts of stuff going on in there. Beautiful place, and it's needed a lot of planning and some vision. And why was it? As I said, it was a scenic jewel. We had over 250,000 this year. I think we hit just this summer 300,000 that come for 3 or 4 months to this place. Millions view it. We have all these photography wars that happen in the fall. We have movies, and I'm sure you've seen it. It's, you know, if you go to places, you'll see that picture. It's really a living organism that changes all year round. But as I said, it took a lot of P's. It took some planning. It took the partnerships. I lumped persistence and patience, the public process, public support, payment and fees, and lastly, I'll talk about the program focus on sustainability. Okay, so that's a little bit of the history of that place. So this shuttle service, or alternative transportation as we call it now, has been going for over 30 years. And it has been interesting because I've been here for a decade, and still people go, oh, this is a new bus system. And it hasn't been. This has been going since 1978. As you can see, this area and this is the same. This was an old ski area parking lot, and it still is a ski area parking lot that has been improved over time for staging. So what happens, they get on this bus with our partners of the ski area and the RAFTA, and they end up at this place we developed in 2005, where they all get off and start walking. As you can see, it's accessible and has been working for a long time. So what happened? And for you guys who are talking about it, this has been 30 years, but it pretty much started with the county commissioners and the Forest Service saying they didn't want to ruin this place. As you can see it, they talked about it as just a matter of minimizing those impacts in that area. So it was quite a vision, and the planning and the partnerships and the persistence to make this go. So this has been a partnership. We have many partners to keep this program going, but I got to give the vision to the Pitkin County, the Aspen area for getting this together with the Forest Service. So as I said, it was like the partnerships with this history. They ended up 30 years. They worked on this. It was a high use to minimize traffic congestion. 9 to 5. It goes from mid-June until Labor Day. And we had to add Fridays in September recently, and we really do need it all in September at this point in time. Started as if you work for the federal government, a challenge cost share partnership, and they were concerned with the road impacts. And in the beginning, before any fees, the Pitkin County gave the Forest Service $25,000 to staff a booth and have this road restricted to keep them minimized during the summer season and use the bus system. So as I said, we about 2002, the Forest Service and many federal agencies used the recreation fee demonstration project that changed this funding from the county leadership to the forest to keep it sustainable. And this year, I just know in 10 years ago, it was 80,000. Now our collections are up to 180,000. to keep this place moving along to 200,000. And as we all know, many partners help support this world-class destination. And what it does is the money. One of the things we've had some no-fee coalitions, but once you tell them that if they want clean toilets and all that, this money just goes to support the boots on the ground to keep the facilities maintained. So as we've just learned, we have lots of partners. We have the ski company that helps us. They do the ticket sales. We have ACES that once you get off the bus, you can do tours. And this last year they did more tours, when you're walking along that. We have 98 volunteers that go into the wilderness and patrol the area and answer questions. And we also have a group called Roaring Fork Volunteers that help in the trail maintenance. And if you notice right here, in order to get these new buses, and there we had a congressman, he was our senator at that point in time, Salazar, and he helped support us to get new buses, and we have new biofuels, hybrids. Now it's natural gas buses. So this was one of our first grants that we got to help support the program. And as you've all heard, it wouldn't happen. And I just shared with you, Roaring Fork Volunteers have helped us maintain some of these places, the rangers, the volunteer rangers. And so it's been a partnership in action that is really supportive. So the other part I talked about is public support, that P, and public awareness. And so they didn't want to pay Paradise and construct the parking, so the county helped on that. And this whole public support of restricting the vehicle traffic for the effects is why you guys are all probably listening to this webinar. And as I said, $6 fees. But now one of the things we've learned, just 10 years ago, it was 50 bikes a day are using that road because it's restricted from 9 to 5, and it's gone to over 300 a day just using the road. We actually might end up working on trying to get a grant to have a separate trail up there along the way. So, and then even just I thought I'd let you know is on the back side of the Bells, you have these beautiful views just of the Seaver Mountains as you're biking and driving up or taking the bus. So the other P I just shared with you is persistence in the patients, and we started in 1983 to get this place up for accessibility and sustainability. So it started then, and then we started a management plan way back when in the 1985, and lack of funding and changed conditions, and it completed in 2005. So it took a long time, about 20 years there. So, and we've also had along the way, as we've gotten the state-of-the-art sustainable facilities up there, I wanted to share a little bit about that patience and persistence on maintenance. So what's happened is that we ended up shutting a 35-unit campground down because we had mud flows, and here's a recent one here. We also had this is our toilet building that has avalanches, and so we basically have the elements, as we all know. This whole area of Colorado has had a lot of floods, and we actually designed this area and avalanches that will withstand some pretty significant Mother Nature impacts. So also, like I said, here's the bus shelter that you saw I shared with you in the winter time, and sometimes it's like this year, it's probably looking like this right now, and even December, but this is what it looks like in the winter. So trying to make that design that can withstand all the elements is a key part of that, persistence and payment and planning and partnerships. So the public support and the public awareness and that it's been an interesting one. So we ended up building a station here to provide information. We've had some signs that we've installed to let people know, because it gets variable message boards, but they do want to know, why do I have to pay? Why can't I drive? And I will tell you that 30, 35 years later, those questions are still there. And I'm not sure if that's the Forest Service or, versus the Park Service, and maybe you guys have that too. But the big one we had, the local issue, was why was this place so expensive to build? And, it took so long. So one of the things I just thought I'd share with you is when I arrived here was Free the Bells. They wanted not to have all the sustainable design, and they wanted to spend $1 million to blow up this toilet, but we've worked it all out in there, so they didn't like us messing with their special place. But that was a couple years of contentiousness, and it's all resolved now. So that's that part of being patient with it and making sure you have the public support. So the sixth part, I said, was the program focus and the sustainability of pay to play. And so having the RIA program now has been a real key one for this area to be sustainable, and having a staff to help you get the information on there. So we have this area, and I just thought I'd share with you. You can see all this area. Even when you built it sustainable, we just had to replace that area because of our elements, and that didn't take more than 2 or 3 years to, once you built it, to making sure the maintenance is there and the funding for that. So we've also gotten some sustainable grants, and we have all this area that has solar, and we have to replace the batteries. And just remember, like you say, you need to have that funding to have new solar panels. We're on our second or third round of solar panels for this welcome station that I shared with you. So having that is so key in the planning part of this, is have the pay. So I just thought I'd share with you a little bit of graph. One of the things we noticed this year is this was in July this year, we were up 13% increase from 2000, and we went up 13%, and we're probably 100,000 people have been taking this bus, and we were this year. So it's gone quite a bit from 2012 to this year, and it's been an interesting one this summer because our, we had the little down from the economics of people wanting to take vacations here, but right now we're feeling the increase and feeling the love. I'm going to switch a little bit with you guys. I want to talk about this Roaring Fork Transportation Authority, and one of the things is that we couldn't have done this without that. It first started with the school, with the ski area using their buses in the wintertime, and then they switched in the summer. But this RAFTA, Roaring Fork Transit Authority, came out, and I just want to share with you, this is, if you're ever wanting to look at this organization, Roaring Fork Transit is the first bus rapid transit in here, and I found out it's the second largest public transit system. It's bigger than anything but RTD, which is down in Denver. And I also found out it's probably one of the largest bus rapid transit systems. So I'm not going to go over the statistics on there, but I just thought they have lots of facilities, and they're a fabulous partner to help us move this forward and move ahead. And where they end in Aspen, Snowmass, and Maroon Bells right here. Right there is Maroon, and they have 10 towns, and they have this whole alternative transportation system to get some of the workers all the way to Aspen, and it is a great transit authority that I just want to share a little story about that. So this year, the RAFTA Bus Rapid Transit just started, and I just noticed that they are doing the 6 Ps. So they ended up voting on this in 2008 to get the passengers with a bus rapid transit system up there, and they branded it this Velocity Rapid Transit. And basically, they got bonds, and they have spent $46 million in the last 5 years to get this transit authority up, and half of it was federal grant money. And so one of the things is that it just got initiated over Labor Day weekend, and they're about to kick off the full bore for this winter season. But one of the things I learned with it, it did follow our 6 Ps. I mean, they basically had to do a lot of planning, and they had to do a lot of partnerships. And the thing I just wanted to share with you is that persistence and patience and public support, because they planned it for the next 30 years. And they have a high percentage of population using the bus right now, and they've allowed them to keep their promise. It was kind of tough if you read the history of that, because of the they got the bonds to do the $44 million, but at the same time with the economy, it didn't kind of come out with the tax revenues and the bonding. So one of the things is planning and patience and the pay, is they are actually using right here. I just thought I'd share with you. they are using ITS, which is a very great system right now. So they're doing alternative transportation, and we're going to have this up at Maroon Bells. Key thing is making sure you have the comm sites ready and all that. So we're going to be using this information technology elements too as well. But this just started in September, so they're doing, if you want to know when the next bus goes to Maroon Bells, they have that. But this is the new key feature of this area, and they have enhanced marketing efforts and these new buses, new stations, and it took them a lot of these 6 Ps. So their public support was they're experiencing, I found, these similar challenges with the new service. And you could hear people going, wait a minute, my pattern's changing, the bus stop's not there, I've got to drive. And so one of the things, if you've been up here, we are notorious for challenging change. So if you have that, we have been experiencing that for years. One thing is this bus rapid transit system flips a switch. It transformed this old school bus operation to the bus rapid transit. And if you live in an urban area, you might have experienced this, but having this in a rural area was interesting. So the public patterns, challenges with moving people and having to go to park and rides versus having the bus come to them has been a challenge, and it's moving along. But I just had to share that the 6 Ps has been a key one. I have the planning I shared with you. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of partnerships. It takes a lot of persistence and patience, as I've shared with you. On the public process, the public support, and the payment and fees is key on this whole thing. And the program focus of sustainability has been one of the major focuses, how to pay for this over time too, so, and make it sustainable. So if you get out here and come visit us, come visit and come and check out how we're still focusing on the 6 Ps at Maroon Bells, and it's been an amazing group of people to make this work for the last 35 years. So if you have any questions, let me know. I can answer them. So.
Okay. Thank you, Martha. It doesn't look like at this particular moment in time we have any questions, but what we're going to do is just hand the presentation back over to David to give us the conclusion and summary, and then we'll take any last-minute questions at the end. David?
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Well, thank you all, and hopefully the outcome of this, you heard about alternative transportation systems, sources of funding for that. We focused a little bit on the Federal Lands Access Program and the Federal Lands Transportation Program. And I think hearing, great stories from Catherine, the National Park Foundation, Sleeping Bear Dunes, the great work Tom and Barbara are doing there, and then the history and the challenges and the 6 Ps that Martha talked about. And again, the different partnerships, the planning that goes into it, the persistence and how you make it pay off in the end, I think is really important. When we think about moving ahead, when you think about your federal land, think about the projects, what issues, what do you need to address? Again, we're talking about primarily alternative transportation systems here. Again, resource protection, congestion issues, getting those other opportunities for people to access your federal land. Remember that operations and maintenance can be expensive and are ongoing expenses, and I give Tom and Barbara a lot of credit and the folks they work for saying, we can't just think of these ongoing expenses as an afterthought, and let's put some money aside as we collect it for that process. Again, that ongoing costs are part of the life cycle costs. You need to operate it and maintain it. At some point, you may need to replace that, whether it's resurfacing a trail or buying a new bus or doing those different things. And really, I think, think about alternative sources of funding and using those friend groups and other options. We all like to turn to what's maybe the most obvious source, which are maybe some of those federal sources, but a lot of people want that money as well. So I think we have to think about those collaborations. And you know, as Tom and Barbara showed, there's a lot of different partners, and each has a different role, and some of it's just managing the partners, and then you have that one that goes out and tries to find funding, or those people who help support the people on the trails, those ambassadors, and all of those things. So think about that. When we talk about resources, certainly the presentation and the information provided by the presenters today provides some information. We have the TripTAC website, triptac.org. We'll have a recording of today's webinar on that, as well as there's our resource library. You can search keywords such as partnerships or funding sources and find information there. And again, as we talked about, the Federal Lands Access Program and the Federal Lands Transportation Program, that's all administered right now by the Federal Highway Administration, so you can go on to their site. You know, certainly look there, look at the information from the regional offices, because those are the folks you're going to talk to if you're putting in an application or as you move ahead possibly with a project. So that is it from me. I thank everyone for their time. If there's additional questions for any of the presenters, we would take them now.
Okay. David, it looks like we have a couple questions already in the wings, and the first question is about Sleeping Bear. It says, where is the donor recognition at Sleeping Bear, inside or outside of the park?
And that donor recognition will take place inside the park. It is part of our approved donor recognition plan. General donations to the park are recognized in our visitor center in a non-permanent way. But for large capital improvements such as this one, we did have in our donor recognition plan the clearance to provide this more lasting recognition, as long as it doesn't interfere with, you know, visitor movement and that sort of thing.
Okay. David, the next few questions are for you. It says, can flat funding be awarded even if target land management policy has declined to participate in FLTP called for project?
I would say yes. The access program, you do need to have concurrence, a sign off from the federal land that you're providing access to. So, you know, a county can't say, hey, we're going to improve the road to, you know, a Forest Service entrance and not basically get concurrence from the Forest Service. So the federal land agency is kind of a, you know, a partner that says, we understand you're bringing access. It might not be us necessarily doing the project, but they're saying, we understand where you're going and concur with that. So you can get funding from either source. You don't have to get both.
Okay. It says, say we're successful with obtaining funds to get a transit system running outside of the park through FLAP. What are the chances that funding would be available during on an ongoing basis?
Well, that's a question. Unfortunately, a lot of us who work in these, you know, when you're getting those federal funds, you're saying, are those going to be there in the future? And again, the federal surface transportation bill, also known as the federal highway bill, typically in the past has been a 6-year bill. So you say, well, I have some confidence that, you know, if I implement something, at least for the next 6 years, it's going to be going. You know, there's a lot of question about federal funding and how much will be there. And, you know, that's a concern. Am I going to start a shuttle service to get access to a federal land, and then in 2 years that goes away, and I'm left saying, well, what do I do now? So, unfortunately, there's no guarantees. You know, due to the planning, I'm hoping that it's there. I think, you know, we're recognizing to some extent we tend to love our federal lands to death, and we need to do something to help protect the resources as well as provide that access and visitor experience.
Okay, and one more question for you. It says, any tips on how to improve competitiveness of FLAP applications?
You know, Catherine mentioned earlier some of the stuff they do for applications, and I think it's the same thing when you look at the applications. Again, they're you know, looking at how many people are coming, what are you trying to address, what is the impact. You know, again, we're trying to show both providing access but protecting resources. So I think it's that combination. And then, you know, certainly the emphasis has been now on those federal lands that are getting impacted the most, which tends to be the ones with the highest visitation. But, you know, the federal land folks are good to visit with, certainly during the application process. And it's just providing good data to say why you need the money. I mean, you need to build your case and go from there.
Okay, and we have another question for Sleeping Bears. It says, how successful are the support, the project donation boxes at Sleeping Bear? What approval was needed to get these in place?
It's pretty early to tell how successful they are. They have not been in place long. They are being used. The approval that was needed is that it is our Friends group that operates them, as Barbara said, the Friends of Sleeping Bear Dunes. And we do have an approved Friends agreement with them, so they are permitted to operate donation canisters and distribute material inside the park as long as it's clearly spelled out on those canisters what the use is of the donated funds and that it is entirely for use within the park.
Tom, just to add, the Friends of Sleeping Bear had those donation canisters designed and fabricated, so if anybody's interested in those, if they send us or send me an email, I'm sure they'd be willing to share who the vendor is for those canisters.
Okay. And it doesn't look like we have any more questions. With that, I'm going to say thank you very much for, oh, hold on. Here we go. Here's another question. It says, would be good to know, other than David Evans, a list of firms that have assisted or led development of multiple use paths in our FLMAs. For example, the NPS Denver Service Center is partnering with Federal Highways Administration to design a multi-use path at the Bryce Canyon and DSC. Also is working with MUPs across the country. Many of these projects are grants. Would be good to collect this list so we can try to access the firm. That was more of a statement.
Yeah, and I just say on the TripTAC website, you know, there's case studies of different projects, and you know, the Denver Service Center uses a number of firms, and you know, Federal Highways, the different divisions have contractors they work with. So, you know, there's different ones out there, and so some of that information is available just looking at the website and looking at, you know, previous projects and saying who were the contractors on that.
Okay, here's a question for Maroon Bells. Why was Maroon Bells designed as a one-way route?
I'm sorry for that misunderstanding. It's basically a cherry stem into a day use area that has lots of developed sites, and right within a half a mile it is a national wilderness area from 1964. So 50 years ago, you go up to Maroon Bells and then you drive back, but it pretty much is a portal to a very significant wilderness area. And so it's not really a one-way route, but the interpretive talk is pretty much one way up there. So pretty much everybody gets driven up on the bus, and then they get picked up back down to the Aspen Highlands.
Okay. There's another question. It says, did all states have a call for projects i.e. all states in the Eastern Lands Division, especially specifically Ohio?
Yes, my understanding is that all the states did have a call, and like I said, there's only the few states in the eastern federal lands region that still have calls open. And one of the reasons why we asked the question earlier, this was a fairly new program through MAP 21, and the implementation of it was somewhat quick with the 2-year bill. It was like, well, we need to get the funds dispersed. And so, some of the discussion about moving ahead is how well that information got out to people, that people know it was there and were able to apply. So I think the feedback we got today helped shed some light on, how many people knew about it and then who knew there was actually a call for projects in their state.
Okay. Another question is, when will the FLTP be open for applications?
That process is still being worked on, and again, the transportation program, that money will go to the different FMLAs. So, the Park Service will get a specific amount of money, and then, most of those agencies are still working on how it gets dispersed then within that specific agency. So, I just check up the chain of command with the different federal land agencies to ask when those funds might be getting programmed and how, say, the Forest Service or Park Service or BLM or anyone might be, applying that money.
Okay. Thank you, David. I would like to say we don't have any more questions at this time, but would like to thank all of you for joining us today, and all of our presenters as well for giving us their perspective. With that, I'm going to leave you with the contact information for the TripTAC, as well as keep an eye out for a survey for feedback on today's webinar. Again, thank you, and a copy of today's presentation is available in the handout section of Live Meeting in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Again, thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.